It's Katrina! From an entire tank in a lake to a cypher machine used to make code, here are 10 incredible, unexpected military finds. Number 10. German Cannon. A German cannon was recently discovered by construction crews while digging up the ground for a new public school. This amazing discovery comes out of Amherstburg in the United Kingdom, where the huge field gun was found buried in the dirt beneath an old pitcher's mound at a local ballpark. The weapon was likely used behind enemy lines while fighting the German forces at legendary battles such as Vimy Ridge. Immediately after the find, the Greater Essex County District School Board decided to donate the amazing discovery to the town of Amherstburg. The mayor of the town even received offers from military historical associations to restore the gun to its former glory. According to the mayor, the cannon probably arrived in 1922 when it was put on display at the local high school. But when the high school moved in 1971, the gun was moved to the park and ended up getting buried somehow. It was then completely forgotten about until construction started again in 2020, leading to its rediscovery. One of the reasons this is such an amazing find is that most artillery from World War I was either scrapped for metal during World War II or otherwise lost to time. There are almost none of these battle instruments still remaining today, making the cannon a precious historical relic. Number 9. Abandoned Soviet submarine. A 1950s Soviet Foxtrot B-80 submarine was left to rot at a dock in Amsterdam waters over a decade ago. It was recently rediscovered and documented by an urban explorer named Bob Tisson. Bob actually paddled out to the vessel in a dinghy and climbed aboard where he had no trouble getting in. It is a perfect time capsule with a trove of relics from back in the 1950s, and of course, everything is in Russian. Bob found the missile room with Soviet stars emblazoned on the missile storage tubes, images of topless ladies tacked to the wall, and hundreds of gauges, pipes, and other instruments dating back over 50 years. The time capsule sub had apparently been abandoned and left wide open with absolutely no security measures in place to stop people like Bob from exploring it. Hey, all the better for us, or we never would have heard about it. As for the Foxtrot submarine, it was entered into the Russian fleet back in 1956, according to the Daily Mail, and was brought to Amsterdam by a Turkish owner who later used it as a space for private parties until it was abandoned around 2005 and left to rust. It allegedly passed between owners, but had accumulated so many towing tariffs that nobody wanted to pay the fines to move it, so they just left it where it's still floating in the middle of Amsterdam. Due to the Foxtrot's deteriorating state, the city is trying to figure out how to get the sub out of its waters. Number 8. Tank in a bog. A massive and powerful Russian tank from World War II was recently pulled out of a swamp. In eastern Estonia, a young boy was out exploring in the woods when he noticed bubbles coming up from the lake and something odd sticking out. He fetched his father, who then gathered some local men, and together they pulled the monstrous T-34 tank out of the muck and marveled at its incredible condition. The tank looked like it still worked. It weighed around 30 tons. According to War History Online, the mobile fortress was probably abandoned by the Germans during their retreat from Eastern Europe. Either that, or it had gotten stuck in battle and forgotten about. The T-34 had definitely been hijacked by the Germans at some point and repainted, since the T-34 was a prime force in the Soviet army but was discovered with German markings all over it. The T-34 was fairly cheap and easy to produce in the 1940s. It was versatile and able to be refined throughout the war effort. At least 80,000 of these vehicles were produced by the Soviets, allowing them to replace tanks as they were lost on the battlefield. In the area of Estonia where the tank was found, a legendary battle had unfolded in September of 1944, killing around 100,000 men. This tank very well could have participated in the battle. Since its discovery, the tank has been taken to the local war museum in Gorodenko and restored. Number 7. Soldier's Handbook. In Michigan, while going through the task of closing his father's estate after he had passed away, a man named Doug Gasborg came upon an extraordinary military artifact over 120 years old. Doug was sifting through his deceased father's belongings when he found an old soldier's handbook from 1901. This relic is just one of many lesser treasures that Doug discovered in his father's military collection. The handbook was old, fragile, very worn, and the pages were yellowed. Still, Doug leafed through it and was amazed by the writing he found inside. It belonged to someone named Max B. Wendland, enlisted in the 13th Regiment of the Cavalry in Detroit. There was an itemized list of Mr. Wendland's monthly military allowance from 1901, as well as a list of 5 names with no other context. Then Doug found 3 inserts of military money, including a 10-cent military certificate and 2 German bills. As of now, Doug is actually trying to find the descendants of the soldier who owned the Handbook, with hopes of reuniting this old military relic to the proper family. He's even working with a genealogist in West Michigan to try and track down Mr. Wendland's lineage to find a blood relative. If you hear anything, be sure to let us know. Number 6. Nazi War Relics. In a shocking turn of events, someone has recently stolen an estimated $1 million worth of incredible military discoveries from a war museum in the Netherlands. Jan de Jong has spent almost his entire life collecting the most fascinating artifacts and uncovering the deepest secrets of the world's militaries and war histories, and overnight, all his work was lost. The thieves stole 23 mannequins of shocking value. Each mannequin was wearing a uniform, some with parachutes and some with firearms that date back to the Waffen-SS branch of the Nazi Party. According to the report from CBC, highly organized thieves have actually been robbing war museums all across the Netherlands recently, often singling out similar items like the Waffen-SS service weapons and other artifacts that can be traced back to Hitler and the Nazi regime. But Jan de Jong is a special case, as his museum is also his home. This guy loves history so much that he lives inside of his museum, among some of the most precious relics in his collection. One of his most treasured items was a German helmet that he had found himself in a ditch 45 years ago. He had gone so far as to even discover the owner of the helmet, and this too was stolen by the thieves, despite it having almost no commercial value. Number 5. The Civil War Torpedo. The Confederate torpedo is a contact mine that would be placed underwater just like any modern mine, where it would then float below the surface of the ocean waiting for something to hit it. It was also known as the Rains barrel torpedo, since it was invented by a man named James Gabriel Rains, who had served as the chief of the Confederate Torpedo Service. Rains had developed many interesting explosives that could be used by the Confederate Army during the Civil War. He developed torpedoes for underwater and subterranean shells to be used on land, as well as some pretty hefty hand grenades. This type of torpedo would be anchored to the bottom of a harbor or along the coast using chains and heavy balls. It kind of looks like a keg or a whiskey barrel. This explosive device was about 45 inches in length, with 2 tapered ends that looked like bullet points. Interestingly enough, some of the first prototypes of this Civil War-era weapon were actually crafted from repurposed barrels or kegs, and they had a bit of a hard time staying still in the water. An effective anchor system needed to be developed to keep the torpedo stationary, but then there were other problems, like the gunpowder getting wet because of an accidental leak or fuses becoming inert because of corrosion. None of these devices are floating around today, but it's a very cool piece of early United States military equipment. You can even see one in the Civil War Naval Museum. Number 4. Greek fire. Greek fire was one of the deadliest weapons of the ancient world. It is believed to have been used for the first time in the 7th century AD by the Byzantine Greeks. This was a huge step beyond flaming arrows or pots full of fire, or even flaming pigs in a catapult. So far as historians know, the true Greek fire was a type of petroleum-based solution invented during the long reign of Constantine IV Pogonatus, between 668 and 685. It was such a powerful substance that the armies of the world soon came to fear it. The substance was able to be thrown inside of a pot or shot out of a tube like a medieval flamethrower. It was so flammable that it could even burn on the surface of water, and its flames could not be extinguished. This ancient military technology has never actually been found, even with all the modern technology we have today. Scientists have found that they are unable to replicate its formula. We only know about it because of historical writings and drawings that detail how the Greeks would launch their fire mixture from massive tubes affixed to the prows of their ships, like when they utterly destroyed the Arab fleet that attacked Constantinople back in the year 673 by lighting the attacking vessels and soldiers on fire. Greek fire was used all the way into the 10th century, with many historians praising it as one of the main reasons why the Byzantine Empire existed for so long, despite fighting so many enemies. Number 3. Unexploded ordnance. An unexploded military shell was recently discovered in an upscale Toronto neighborhood. Homes in North York had to be evacuated for hours after a landscaper happened upon an artillery shell just kind of half buried in the dirt. The police and firefighters were called in, and even the bomb squad. All of this happened before 11 a.m. in the morning, prompting authorities to evacuate all of those in the immediate area. If the artillery shell had exploded, it could very well have blown apart a nearby building and done some serious damage. Luckily, there was no explosion. The shell was recovered and disposed of. What's really crazy is that there has never been armed conflict in Canada with artillery shells, so nobody can understand what a piece of equipment like this was doing in somebody's yard in the city of Toronto. Number 2. Ancient artifact reunited with soldier's son. In 2012 in France, a guy named Kevin Greneau was using his metal detector in a large field searching for World War II relics. What he discovered was a more significant find than anything Kevin had ever found before. It was a bracelet stuck 10 inches beneath the dirt. Kevin took his discovery home and gave it a quick wash, then noticed the name and serial number engraved on the bracelet. He tried to contact French authorities to get some information, but he was basically ignored. Kevin had to do the research himself, though not before putting the bracelet in a drawer and forgetting about it for 8 years. In 2020, Kevin tried to find the owner of the bracelet yet again, because, quarantine and all that. He contacted a professional genealogist in the USA who used photos of the bracelet and the name and serial number of its owner to track the man down. It was all the genealogist needed to discover that the bracelet had belonged to U.S. Army Sergeant Marshall Glenn Phillips from North Carolina. Phillips had passed away in 1986, but with the help of the genealogist, Kevin was still able to find his only surviving son and pass on the bracelet. He mailed it to the genealogist, who actually drove 700 miles to deliver it in person to Sergeant Phillips' 80-year-old son in North Carolina. Imagine what it would be like to get something from your father or your grandfather like that. How amazing! Suffice it to say that his son was very emotional. Number 1. The Enigma Machine. In 2020, German divers searching the Baltic Sea for lost fishing nets found something shocking: a rare piece of history with keys, a rotor, a whole lot of algae, and some dangerous secrets. This was an Enigma cypher machine, used by the Nazis during World War II to send encrypted messages of great importance. The German divers had never expected to find a military relic like this during their dive. They had come upon it completely by accident. According to Live Science, the Enigma machine worked by substituting one letter for a random letter when a message was being typed on the machine. This created a letter that would make no sense, unless of course you had an Enigma machine on the other end to decode it. This particular Enigma machine had 3 rotors inside, indicating it probably came from a warship. Submarines almost always had more complex Enigma machines than warships, with 4 rotors instead of 3, according to historian Jan Witt with the German Naval Association. When the war was ending, the German Navy actually sank a huge number of ships and submarines to keep them away from the Allied forces. This is how a lot of Enigma machines ended up at the bottom of the ocean, probably just like the one that was found by the German divers. But this one isn't on the bottom of the ocean anymore. The Enigma machine has been reclaimed and handed over to the local archaeology museum in the Schleswig-Holstein region of Germany to be put on display. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite thing about military history? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe and come back soon. See you later. Bye!